Welcome back to the John Fredericks Radio Show. This is your guest host, Mike Rubino. We have a jam-packed 2 hours coming up. Right now, we are joined by Secretary of Labor Scalia. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for joining us on the John Fredericks Radio Show this Friday.
Mike, my pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Now, I read your bio. You went to the University of Virginia, so you have some Virginia ties.
You know, I did. So did my wife. Just graduated a daughter there.
Oh.
And, I've lived in Virginia a long time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining. I wanted to start big. The Trump administration has had what has been a remarkable run on the labor front over the last 3 years, with unemployment rate hitting 50-year lows. Can you talk broadly about the president's agenda to create jobs in this country and how that's translated into job creation, both in Virginia and on a national basis?
Yeah. Let me say, first of all, Mike, that I've only been in this job a little while. I became labor secretary in late September, and before that, I was in the private sector for many years, and a lot of the work that I did focused on federal regulation and had a number of lawsuits during the Obama administration to challenge regulatory requirements. And I've been following regulatory policy really since the Reagan administration. I've been in the government a number of times, watching what the government does with regulation. And, so just watching from the private sector what this president was doing, I thought from the start that it was potentially unprecedented. I think you have to go back really all the way to the introduction of the use of cost-benefit analysis to evaluate rules in the Reagan administration to find changes as great in how the government's regulating as what President Trump is doing right now. And just one example, early in the administration, the president said, for every new rule we adopt, we're going to take 2 out. Yep. 2 for 1. Government's too big. If we're going to have more regulations, and sometimes we need to regulate something new, we're going to find 2 to take out. Now, the administration actually is at 7 to 1. For every new rule that's being brought in, we're taking 7 out. That is resulting in a really unprecedented reduction in the regulatory burden on the American people. And that is one of the main things stoking the economy that we have right now, Mike. And just to touch briefly on the economy, it's historic. Mm-hmm. We hit a 50-year low in unemployment last year. Created 6.6 million jobs since the president came in, and we're seeing rising wages and raising wages rising more quickly for lower paid workers. And now that's about deregulation. It's about tax cuts too. Yep. But for me, deregulation has been a big part of it.
And touch on unemployment rates. I mean, it doesn't matter what demographic or socio-demographic group you're looking at. It's African American, Hispanic American, Asian American, Americans without a high school degree. I mean, this economy works for every American. And that's, I think, a big deal and a real talking point for everyone this 2020 year. It's a re-election year, and the economy's booming, and it's because of deregulation and things that this administration's doing. They're putting the American worker first.
Yeah, I mean, you laid the numbers out. In 2019, the year just ended, we hit all-time recorded lows in unemployment for African Americans, for Hispanic Americans, for Asian Americans, and a 70-year low in unemployment for adult women. The single best thing the federal government can do for the American worker is to establish the conditions for a thriving economy. And that's what the president has done. And what we're seeing is that it's been helping some of the men and women who historically have been most disadvantaged in the workplace. And like I said, when you look at wages, too, they're actually rising more quickly for lower paid workers than they are for their managers. And by the way, that's a reversal from where we were during the Obama administration, when the managers' wages were going up more quickly than the people that reported to them.
Well, one of the interesting things, kind of the juxtaposition of the Trump administration and the Obama administration that I've always found interesting is the labor force participation rate. So that's a measure of the economy's active workforce. the number trended down significantly under the Obama administration and is ticking back up quickly under the Trump administration. So, can you talk a little bit about how the administration is bringing new people into the workforce? I mean, I believe the answer is somewhere around 9 million new jobs you've created or are creating.
Yeah, well, when we talk about unemployment, what the unemployment number is, we're focused on people who say that they're actively looking for work. But, Mike, as you're suggesting, when you look behind that number, there's a bigger question. Well, what about people who've just given up? What about people who think there's no work out there? So they're not looking for work. They're not counted in the unemployment rate that gets reported in the news every month. And so we call those people marginally attached or discouraged workers, and there's been really good news on that front too. Like you said, the labor force participation, that is, the number of people looking for jobs, has been going up for much of this administration after tacking down during the Obama administration, and the practical reality of that, for example, is at the last quarter of last year, 3/4 of the jobs that were filled by people who weren't even in the labor force. They weren't being counted in that unemployment number because they'd given up, but they came back. They saw how strong the economy is. They came off the sidelines, and they're filling the jobs. So that's just more good news that you see when you get behind the top-line unemployment statistics that you hear reported.
Well, it's obvious that President Trump, the administration, your Labor Department has kickstarted the economy. And, I ran Virginia in the primary campaign and general election in 2016. And what we saw then, and I think you see it less now, is that manufacturing jobs were basically gone. So south of Charlottesville, south of the University of Virginia, you had all of these manufacturing plants that had gone out of business. But on top of that, Virginia also has a booming agricultural sector. How are the efforts translating to bring the manufacturing jobs and the farming and agricultural jobs back to the country and across the state of Virginia? How is that, how are you implementing, kickstarting the economy in those specific sectors, which are very Virginia specific?
There have been about 500,000 manufacturing jobs added during the Trump administration.
Tremendous.
And I've already talked about how important deregulation is to that. Eliminating unnecessary burdens so that businesses are excited to invest and expand and hire more workers. That's been very important to the growth we're seeing. But the other thing is the president's focus on renegotiating our trade arrangements so that we've got fair and reciprocal trade with Mexico and with China and with other trading partners. And I think when you look both at manufacturing, Mike, and also at agriculture, that those trade deals are going to be of great benefit in Virginia and throughout the country. And the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is just one example. The president was very unhappy with NAFTA, and he was unhappy because he thought it was driving good-paying jobs away from the U.S. And, he has said he ran for president as much as any other reason because he wanted to reverse that, and he's now done so.
Right.
And
promises made, promises kept.
Exactly. And, USMCA was a huge bipartisan achievement by the president just last month. And our estimate is it could bring as many as 500,000 new jobs or more to the U.S. Meantime, we've also opened up the Canadian market more to U.S. agricultural product. As you know, Canada has had some pretty restrictive rules on dairy, for example.
Yep.
So when I sort of step back and look at it, I see an historic 2019 for our economy, but I also see, as we enter 2020, some really important foundations being laid for another terrific year. Again, USMCA and that Phase 1 agreement with China.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I have one more question for you before we go to Governor George Allen. What are you seeing as you travel this great nation? Just anecdotally, paint us a picture, give us a narrative. What are you seeing when you get out there?
Look, I'm seeing businesses, factories that are expanding. I was just down in North Carolina yesterday, watching this just immense new factory growing up. They'll be hiring hundreds of workers there, and so I'm seeing people hard at work with rising wages. And the other thing I'm hearing is this, which is really important to understanding how strong the economy is right now. I'm hearing business people, large business and small business, saying the biggest problem I have right now is finding all the workers I need. I want to grow, and the job market is so tight that I'm looking high and low for workers. That is just powerful evidence of a strong economy. It's the reason wages are rising, and it's a result of these policies that the president has put in place that we've been talking about.
Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on your appointment. Congratulations on everything. I mean, this is a banner year for the Trump administration. 2020 is looking great, and I wish you all the best.
You too, Mike. Have a great weekend.